Well, I think we are heading for a deep global recession. In many ways, it does mirror what happened through the global financial crisis, which in itself became a deep global recession and threatened to become the Great Depression Mark II. So we have to act decisively, and we have to act quickly.
How is this different from the global financial crisis, which you saw up close? This time round, you have a bird's eye view of the situation.
Well, during the global financial crisis, we were haunted by the one real lesson of history, that typically governments have acted too timidly and acted too late. We were acutely aware of that, which is why the minute we had finished announcing our first stimulus package, we began working on our second stimulus package, because the real fear right through until early 2009 is that it wasn't going to just be a recession, it was going to be the Great Depression Mark II. Now, that was avoided because of decisive coordination internationally through the G20 and through summits which occurred in early April of 2009. So there's a clear template there, but what's different with this episode is that large sections of the economy are simply being quarantined, if you like, locked out of economic activity. So that puts a huge premium on avoiding business bankruptcy, which will occur much more quickly than it would, if you like, in a normal deep recession. But also large sections of the workforce are also locked out of participation. So that means that unemployment will more likely go up far more quickly than it would in previous occasions. So these are two very big, immediate challenges for our economy, which do require specific action.
Do you think the government is moving fast enough? It was less than a week ago that they announced the first stimulus package worth $17.6 billion. They're already looking at a second one. Is that the speed in which you're talking about?
Well, to begin with, the government was slow out of the blocks. They had the Governor of the Reserve Bank last year advising them to stimulate the economy because it was very weak and consumption was low. So, you know, they didn't take that advice then. So we go into this episode far weaker than we should have been had they acted last year. But look, I support the actions they've taken in their first stimulus package. They're clearly not enough. Because the ink is barely dry and we're seeing the second tranche of actions, and I commend that. I mean, we are going to have very specific actions dealing with a number of sectors, and I see they're working their way through that. In our second stimulus package, we did precisely that, because you can't necessarily see all of what is about to unfold. So what you have to do is have a comprehensive range of plans, but you'll have to adjust them as you move through, because the decisions you're taking do not have a clear line of sight of where the problem will actually end. And that is why it is so difficult in this situation to accurately characterise it and then to develop the response with the speed that's required.
Do you think it would be prudent for the government to do more on the consumption side, or the second stimulus package just needs to look at seriously saving jobs?
Look, I think that they have to do both, but the first package had too little, in my view, on consumption. It had a lot more for business, but they're going to have to do a lot more in that area. If large businesses and sections of the economy are simply quarantined, that will bring on job losses more quickly and potential bankruptcies for companies more quickly. So that is going to be an area which does require intense focus.
Without taking on a partisan tone, can you now look at this 10 years on since the GFC, and can you say, well, we made mistakes that you would advise the government against making now?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is that we've now finally buried this notion that governments shouldn't intervene because having the cleansing power of a recession will do some good in the economy. The government has dropped that. And given that they opposed for the last 12 years virtually all of what we did via stimulus in its various iterations, including sectoral packages, I absolutely welcome their change of heart, and I wish them all the best. But it will be the case, as you respond with the speed that's required and the size that's required, some mistakes will be made. But not to act in this environment will produce an even worse outcome. If you like, the cost of inaction are greater than the cost of action.
What mistakes did you make?
So, some of our programs had some design faults, but none of that was systemic. They attacked, for example, our school halls program, which was overwhelmingly great value for money and has left enduring assets for the Australian people for 50-odd years. So that was a program that I think received the most attention. Others talk about pink bats. There were problems in that area of occupation, health and safety. There was a Royal Commission that went to the very core of it and didn't conclude or agree with most of the substantial criticisms that were put repeatedly by the government and others through this period.
The Prime Minister has described this as being on a war footing, and the apparatus of departments and the public service has swung in behind the government quite quickly on this. Can you give us an idea of what actually happens behind the scenes during such times?
Well, you're working around the clock. So we were sitting a special committee of Cabinet almost daily for months and months and months. You are constantly liaising not just with the public sector, with your officials. You are constantly talking to the business community, you're talking to trade unions, you're talking to workers, because in this environment, there's no clear one accurate source of information as the situation changes, not just daily, but hourly. So you really have to have your finger on the pulse, and you really have to include all of the best minds, policy minds, if you like, have them at the table, or certainly have them on tap. Now, I don't know whether the government is consulting as widely as they should. I certainly hope they are now listening more to the Treasury on these questions of stimulus, because the problem we've got here, how can you trust a Prime Minister who spent 12 years bagging stimulus now to be out there actively supporting it? Now, I hope he is. I hope they've learnt the lessons of history, that there is reason for government to intervene in these circumstances and get on with it. So my advice would be listen very closely to your officials, but also consult far more widely across the community, the business community, but most importantly also internationally. The big change here from last time is we don't have the G20 sitting and working effectively. As a G20 finance minister, Kevin Rudd as Prime Minister, both of us were constantly on the phone to our counterparts across the major advanced economies, seeking their advice, seeing what they were doing, learning from it, but also developing with them the sort of global response that is required. And the global response that came in April 2009 was the response that averted a Great Depression Mark II. We've not seen that sense of urgency in the international bodies, either in health or in the economy, through the G20. That is absolutely needed, because at the end of the day, this is a national and an international problem.
Can anything be done to avoid a recession?
Well, I think we should be doing everything we possibly can to avoid a deep recession. It destroys lives, it destroys communities, and it destroys productive capacity. Yes, it is. Absolutely realistic. We avoided a recession last time, the only major advanced economy in the world to avoid a recession, because we went hard, we went early, and we went fast. Now, we were criticised for that for years and years, but the lesson of history was learnt. We avoided a recession. It proves the power of public policy if implemented powerfully and correctly.
Wayne Swan, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Good to be with you.